It's Friday. It's Friday with friends, and I am here with Papa Joe Gaudet. Oh, there I am. Let me make myself a little smaller. Oh, that's the other way. I can't. I'll have to back up. So, welcome everybody to Friday with Friends. I hope you're having a great time wherever you are. In New Hampshire, it is a little drizzly and grey, I have to say.
That's why I'm wearing my rain hat.
It is a little soggy outside. But Papa Joe and I are here, and we're going to have some fun. And I'm going to see who is arriving. So if you do arrive, then please. Sorry, Quinn's here. Nice, Quinn. How you doing?
Hi, Quinn.
And Casey Squibb.
Oh, Casey too.
Here. Yay! Hey, Casey, how's it going? I hope you're doing well.
Hi, Evelyn. Hi, Julia.
It's good to have you. I'm going to move my camera a little bit because it's.
Hi, Althea.
So it's good to have you all here, and it's just me and Papa Joe today. We're just going to hang out and have some fun. So what have you been up to, Papa Joe?
What have I been up to?
Yeah.
Lately?
Yeah.
Working on the Vardo. I'm trying to get a new electrical system in so that it's kind of like having power instead of like being in a tent.
That would be important. Are you going to be sticking around or?
So after Thanksgiving, I'm planning on moving out of New England for a little while, heading south and west. My ultimate goal is Arizona, but I don't know how long it's going to take me, of course, because who knows what roads will be opened and or closed.
Right.
So it's kind of like drifting for a little while. I'll be back here in the spring.
Well, that's good because we'll miss you up here. We really will. So who's that? We've got Pete here, Pete Abdallah. Hey, if you go down to Florida, you got to go and meet up with Pete. I think you and Pete would get on like a house on fire.
Well, Florida wasn't on my list, but it could happen.
Yours are still in school for the next 15 minutes. Oh, are you going to be able to get them and drag them home? Oh, here's Jane, one of our top fans. Jane Dorfman.
Ah, Jane, I am hoping to see Jane this time.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Nice.
I used to stay at Jane's fairly regularly back when I was touring nationally.
I know when I saw her at Stone Soup, she did mention that, and she said, "I didn't know you used to smoke." And apparently,
yeah, glad I don't anymore.
Apparently, when you walked into the house, you knew that you were there.
You still know, just I smell like rosemary now instead of.
It's true. It's true, which is a much more pleasant smell than smoke. My mum used to smoke, and the house, it was awful. But she doesn't do that anymore. Judy, hi, nice to have you here with us. And Rachel Ann Harding, I'm so glad that I'm so glad that you made it too.
Lots
the kids are here already. Oh, they're remote learning. Oh, that's good. I like that. Yeah, so Perry's school, they had an outbreak, and so they are now totally remote. And it's kind of good because that way Perry's not going to bring any germs home, which we really don't want to have happen.
Yeah. So I've been doing outside performances all summer, and the season is ending at this point, which is why I'm thinking of moving operations south because I can go back outside once I get down there a little bit. Today's shows were, kind of damp.
It is. It really. My knees haven't started aching, but I'm surprised they don't. It's that kind of weather. As you can see, I'm all. This isn't my performance gear. This is my. It's getting chilly.
Well, so I really did active stories today so that the kids could be jumping around and bouncing around inside the story, and that helps. But at some point, the temperature is going to drop too low for even that.
Right. I have a gig next week, which was going to be live and outdoors, and I was like, this is November. We might get snow, so I'm actually doing it remote now, because I'm not going into a school at this particular point.
And once you go remote, it really doesn't matter where you are as long as you have bandwidth.
Right. And the mental bandwidth is important too. So Papa Joe and I, he's been out of my life for so long, and it's so good to have him here. He's down in my basement, and I'm going to show you the setup that I made for him. Hang on. Feels, oh, you can't see it, but right behind his shoulder there's a nice piece of barked wood. Yeah, it's like a big tree trunk slice that I actually pulled it from the forest on one of my walks with Mo. They were clearing some of the power lines, and they took down a number of trees, and they were trying to lower the level of the stumps, I guess. And I brought a couple of them back, but they were heavy. Now they're nice and light because they've dried out. So never be afraid of snow. Well, that's a true statement. That's what Rachel Hedman says. Never be afraid of snow. But anyway, Papa Joe and I, we got together 2 days ago. I didn't even know. Anyway, not too far back in the distant past, Papa Joe and I was helping him out with a show that he was doing in India, which was a really good show. And in fact, Kristen Pedamonte, who is on with us, she was also telling stories. And Buck Creasy was telling stories. I love Buck. When I first met him, because he was burgled, and I set up a thing for him so that people could help him out, buy equipment again for his studio. And I hadn't met him. I'd been emailing with him and all the rest of it. And when I met him at one of the NSN conferences, he's a giant. He's like 6'4" or something ridiculous like that. I had no idea. And when I saw him, I was like, oh my gosh, he's so big. But he's like this big old teddy bear. I love the guy. He's so great. Anyway, Papa Joe and I were talking about one of the first live Facebook things that we did, and it was so much fun. And it was yesterday. There you go. Kristen said it was yesterday, so it must have been yesterday.
It was yesterday morning in India, which was last night. No,
in India. Well, it was last night in India. Yeah, it was yesterday morning for us. It was their evening. So yeah. And Buck, yeah, he is a great human guy. He is. So sorry, Papa Joe, were you reading that? I'll put it back up.
No, so anyway, I have some stuff here.
Okay. So Papa Joe and I, we were talking about our live hello. Our live show that we did at Skudax. And Skudax is a coffee shop down the road in Warner. I don't know how many years ago we did it, probably 2 or 3. I don't know. But we had so much fun. And Papa Joe was like, we should do that again sometime. I was like, well, let's do it. We'll do it now. We're going to swap stories. So, and actually, when you started, when I put you down in the basement, got the laptop set up, you were doing a Christmas carol. Do you want to play that for our audience? That's French for audience, you know.
We'll see what comes out, because I never know what's going to come out.
Okay. All right. Well, whatever you want to play it. You don't have to do a Christmas carol. That was gorgeous.
It is beautiful. I love it.
I know. There are some carols which are just absolutely yummy to listen to. Silent Night is one of my favorites. I love that.
So one of the things I'm thinking about doing is after Thanksgiving, doing a live stream for each of the carols that I play once a day. Do one song. And then maybe I could catalog some of the music that I do.
That's a good idea. I like that idea.
So
where we're going to tell stories, but where are you going Where are you heading to on
So
your winter
I
road trip?
have, I have thousands of friends out there, and
Oh, well, thousands? Just thousands?
so I
Not
don't really
millions?
know who's going to be available, to let me visit and how that will work out because of course in different areas, I mean, there are people I can't visit. Their homes
Right.
surrounded by areas that are red on the maps for being dangerous, so I won't go there. If there are some places where there's less of a problem and I can stay for a while, that would be nice. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And I'll find out as I go along. But my sister has a place down on the Mexican border in Arizona. So
Ooh,
I'm heading there because I know I will be safe and on her compound and I can just park there and wait and deal with whatever. And it looks like, things will be turning around by the end of winter. So hopefully those won't be the problems anymore. And then I can make plans.
right.
I made plans 4 or 5 times this year.
I think we all did,
And I'm pretty
at
much just
least.
giving up on that.
I know
So
it'll be, yeah, it was like, we're going to do a gig. And then it's like, we might do a gig. And then it's like, maybe we'll do a virtual gig. And maybe we'll postpone it and we'll do it later on in the summer. And maybe we'll do
right.
a virtual gig. And maybe we'll do it later on in the fall. Maybe we'll do a virtual gig. Yeah, it's been bonkers this year. It's been
But,
truly crazy.
so I was doing those live streams twice a day.
You stopped doing that?
Well, I did 201 of them. And that's 201 different stories.
That's amazing.
Some of them told several times, some of them, so that in some of the episodes have more than one tale, but 201 different stories and 201 episodes. And I'm just not feeling that anymore. I need to find some other way to deal with that. So I'm thinking after the Christmas carols are done, maybe I can go back to telling stories maybe once a day, and I'll just try to see if I can get my story catalog a little clearer because some of those stories most of those stories I just told off the top of my head.
So are there stories that you still have that you don't know off the top of your head that you could like pull out of the bag and work on?
Yes, oh, definitely. There's at least a dozen stories that I would like to have done live stream that I have not done yet because I don't really feel like I can do them justice unless I actually worked on them. So yeah, some stories you can just tell and
Yeah.
easy to tell, and there's some stories that are really difficult. For example, this weekend, Jay O'Callahan is doing the Little Dragon.
Yes.
Oh my God, I will not miss that. Jay O'Callahan's Little Dragon has got to be one of the 20th century greats. His story is incredible. And I told Jay O'Callahan's Little Dragon, it is difficult. It's a lot of work to put together, and I haven't done it in, close to maybe 35 years. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
So
It's an amazing story.
yeah, so I hope to be talking to Jay and see if he'll give me permission to do one telling of it on live stream because, of course, it's his story, not mine.
Right.
Normally, the stories I do are public domain anyway, but there are a few there that are owned by people, and I try to respect them. So,
Right.
and Jay is one of my favorite tellers anyway. So,
Yeah, he's awesome. So the reason why I'm leaving that up there a little bit longer is because Jane Jennings is my sister-in-law. So Jane, do you have the kids with you today? They might have some. I'm waiting for an answer, but it's going to be like a couple of minutes before we get an answer from. It's got to come all the way from England, you see.
yeah.
And actually, so Jay O'Callahan, yes, he is going to be telling stories at the Nest Fest, which is going to be there's going to be 2 family shows. One of them Saturday morning and one of them Sunday morning. And I shall put up in when Papa Joe's telling a story, I shall go and put the information up in the chat there, and I'll also put it up on a banner because it's going to be incredibly good. The Saturday show, I'm emceeing, I'm hosting that, and we have Taffy Thomas, who is Taffy's been around forever, and he is one of my favorite Storytellers, and he's one of the. Not only that, he's an amazing human being. So Aidan and I, at the beginning of this year, which feels like 10 years ago now, Aidan, my son, and I, we went to England to go and see my family before COVID got really bad. It was right when everyone was talking about it, and everyone was like, well, maybe the country will shut down. So we hoofed it over there. And I got in touch with Taffy and said, hey, Taffy, can I come and visit you and interview you for my podcast? Because face-to-face is so much better than doing it online. And he said yes. So we got off the airplane. We flew into, what airport did we fly into? It was up by my sister. I don't want to say Liverpool, but it was up north anyway. So we flew up north. We got out of the airport. We drove straight to Taffy's place, which is up in the Lake District, which is another, like, I don't know how many hours to get up there, maybe an hour or two, hour and a half, 2 hours, I don't know. And we spent the rest of the day with him. We then went and checked in at the youth hostel where Aidan and I were staying in the town. We met him and his wife Chrissy for supper that night in a pub, which my son was very excited about because he was still 19 at the time. He's 20 now, and he was able to drink legally. So he was like, "Yay!" Because we've never let him drink alcohol before that. And then the next day we spent the whole morning with Taffy, and then we did a little hike, and then we shot off to my sister's because she's up in sunny Doncaster. And that he was just so gracious, and Chrissy so gracious. They're such wonderful people. Anyway, Taffy Thomas is going to be there. And then Liz, he's not going to be there. We've got a video of him because he's not very comfy with tech, which is fine. So we're showing a video that he's made for us, which is great. And then Liz Weir, who is a legend in her own right in Ireland, and she's going to be telling stories. And then we've got Mara Menzies, who's from Scotland and is an incredible storyteller. She's actually Scots Kenyan. And then we've also got Carl Goff, who's from Wales. He's going to be telling some stories too, and I'm so excited about that. And then on Sunday, I should know this. I'll look it up and I'll put it up in a minute because I don't want to spend too much time talking about that.
And we have story swaps tonight, Saturday night, and Sunday.
Right.
So if people are interested in being part of the Nest Fest, they can join in at the swaps. I'm running the Sunday one.
That's right. And there's a host. I'll put the link up and so everybody can check it out for themselves. And Kristen says she's got tickets, which is good. Tony Toledo, hugs to you. That's nice. Oh. So my sister-in-law Jane, she says that she's got the kids for 9 hours, but they're bored with our conversation already. Jane, we're going to tell stories. Drag them back. Oh, getting supper now. That's right. Yeah. Mara Menzies is an incredible storyteller. She's freaking awesome. And not many people know Carl Goff over here. And he's really underrated. He's so good. He's one of those secrets that some people know about. And I'm really excited to be introducing him. He's my friend now as well, which is excellent. And I'll tell you about the Sunday. I'll tell you Sunday in a minute. I'm going to put the link up. Otherwise, I'm just going to spend the whole time talking about Nest Fest. And that's not what we're here for. I mean, we can plug it, which is fine. But but we need to get on. Papa Joe, what's your favorite story?
My favorite story is the story that I'm telling right now.
Which is going to be what?
Oh, I don't know. I actually was working on a Hans Christian Andersen story recently. And I was reminded of that when I was up in your office earlier and saw the screen up for that. I don't tell a lot of Hans Christian Andersen stories. They're very literary and often difficult to tell that way.
Right.
But he was an incredible storyteller.
He was. He was amazing. And I always liken Jay to our own Hans Christian Andersen in this.
Yeah. Although David Novak is probably
really.
Really. Have you heard him tell?
Well, no, I was thinking of literary stories.
Yeah, David Novak.
He writes his own story.
He has a story. I was listening to him tell a story, and I thought I knew every Hans Christian Andersen story in existence, and he was telling a story that I would swear is a Hans Christian Andersen story. It was his own.
Ah.
Yeah, it's about a salt cellar. So make sure you hear that one.
I will. I will. I'm hoping that when I get to go and visit Gwenda, I'll be able to.
Yeah.
I'll see
Another great
David
story.
Novak.
All right, so I'm working on a story, and I can share that right now. It's not in bad condition. The Goblin and the Grocer.
It's just got a few dents and dings in it, a few scratches down the side.
It means it's rough in the beginning where you're starting to get into it, right?
Which is what we were talking about earlier as well. All right, so you ready?
I am.
Okay, it's all yours.
Once there was a grocer, right? He owned a grocery store. It was a small place, and he lived up above the grocery store, and he had a goblin in the grocery store. It was a nice goblin, and the goblin stayed there, and the grocer, every Christmas, the grocer would give him a stick of butter with some jam on it. Oh, the goblin loved the grocer, and the grocer never had any problems because he had a goblin to take care of them. Well, upstairs in his garret, he leased that to a student, a poor student who couldn't afford any other place to live but an attic. And so the student who had nothing but the attic lived up in the attic, in the garret. And the grocer owned everything else, including the goblin. Anyway, one day, the student came downstairs to the grocery to buy a little bit of bread and cheese. And while he was in the store, the grocer's wife, who was a wonderful chatty woman, was talking away, and she folded up the butter that he was buying in a bit of paper, and as she handed it to him, he handed her the money, and he looked at the paper the butter was wrapped in, and he realized it was poetry. Well, he was a student of poetry, so of course he had to read the poem, and he turned to the grocer and said, "What is this?" The grocer said, "Well, there was a poor woman who came in the other day looking for some butter, and she couldn't afford it. All she had was this book of poetry. So I swapped her a bit of butter for the poetry book. I figured I could use it to wrap butter in anyway." The poet said, how much would you like for that book?" The man said, "Well, it cost me a bit of butter, so I would take..." And he gave his price for the butter, and the student looked at what he was about to pay and said, "Well, then, you keep the butter. I don't need it for my bread. I'd rather have the book." And he gave the money to the grocer, and the grocer's wife gave him the book. He said, "You know, you're quite a grocer, but you don't know any more about poetry than that vat over there." And he pointed at the dustbin. Well, the grocer laughed, and the student laughed, because it was all in fun. But when the student left, there was somebody who wasn't laughing, and that was the goblin, who thought that the student had misspoken. Why, his grocer was the most wonderful person in the world, and after everybody had gone to bed, the goblin went up and borrowed the grocer's wife's tongue. Yes, he knew that tongue worked very, very well, and so she didn't need it while she was sleeping. He popped it out of her mouth, brought it back down to the grocer's, and he stuck it on the dustbin. He said, "Is it true? Is it true that you don't know anything about poetry?" Well, the dustbin started chatting right away. "Oh, I do know about poetry. Why, poetry is one of the things that's in the newspapers, and newspapers go in me. So I get to know all about things that are in newspapers, and poetry is one of them. I have read a great deal of poetry." Well, the goblin thought, then the student was wrong, and he plucked the tongue off the dustbin and stuck it on the coffee mill to see what the opinion of the coffee mill was. The coffee mill just ground out a few words. "Oh, yes, definitely. The student doesn't know what he's talking about." So the goblin tried the tongue on several other things down in the grocery, and when he was sure that the student was obviously misspoken, he dropped the tongue in the dustbin and headed up to the garret to give that student a piece of his mind. Well, when he got there, there was a bit of light coming through the keyhole. So the goblin peeked through the keyhole, and what did he see there? But the student reading by the fire, a single candlelight. And as he watched, why, it seemed to him that musical notes began to flow out of the book. And as the student read that poetry book, colors sprang into the room. And a beautiful tree grew there, and flowers. It was a garden. The goblin was amazed. Why, the power of poetry was beyond his comprehension. And suddenly he decided that maybe he should move in with the student. And then he remembered the butter and the jam and decided that perhaps he could just visit the student once in a while. He didn't want to give up the butter or the jam. And he headed back downstairs. Good thing that he did, because the dustbin had almost worn that tongue out. Well, after that, the goblin spent his days down in the grocery, taking care of that grocer and his wife and their needs. But in the evening, he would head on up the stairs after the grocer had gone to bed. He would head up the stairs and he would watch through the keyhole and listen to the poetry and see the beautiful, beautiful things that poetry brings. And so it was. And so it went until one day there was a fire, a terrible fire in the town. There were sirens going off everywhere. People were running and screaming. The grocer's wife, she grabbed the earrings out of her ears and put them in her pocket for safekeeping. And the grocer, he ran over and he grabbed the cash drawer and the ledger. And the goblin, realizing that the important things must be saved, rushed up to the attic and grabbed the poetry book, climbed out the window, up onto the roof, and sat up on the chimney guarding it. And as he sat there, watching the fires in the town below, he knew he had saved the most important thing in the building, the book of poetry. And he thought that perhaps he could belong to both the student and the grocer. I mean, he really loved the student now, but he couldn't give up the jam. And that's really, we all have that problem, right? Yeah.
Yes, we do.
But that's the story of The Goblin and the Grocer by Hans Christian Andersen. I hope you enjoyed it.
That's excellent. We actually told that as part of the festival this year, but it was.
Did you?
Yeah, I didn't. Somebody else did.
I missed it. I'll have to find the clips from that.
Yeah, it was. So the thing I found about Hans Christian Andersen is that they're fascinating stories, but a lot of them are still so very relevant today, which is, in some ways kind of sad at the same time.
Oh, they're pretty relevant.
It means that we haven't changed and we're still going through the same problems that he had. So yeah, we got some nice comments from this. One of them from Rachel Hedman: handy to have a goblin, which is totally true. I agree with that. And borrowing a tongue is also very interesting. I've never had to do that myself. And Jane says, listening, great voices. Hans Christian Andersen does have some very weird stories, that's for sure. And Kristen says, love the image of the music and the colors spiraling out of the book. Yeah.
I really, you should listen to that story a year from now after I've had a chance to explore it more. I mean, it's just in its beginning stages.
Yeah, I bet it's going to change a lot. Full
of images, beautiful things. But that's the gist of the tale, so that's where it starts.
Well, I thought it was you told it wonderful. Like I said the other day, right? You knock it out of the park because you're consistently good.
Thank you. I don't agree, but it's all relative, right?
It is. I mean, it all depends on where you are, like you said, and what we're doing.
So I told that story.
Colin, nice to have you here, Colin.
Hi, Colin.
Colin's all the way from Ireland. He's one of Liz Weir's buddies. So that's really, I'm honored that you're here, actually. So thanks for joining us. So we were talking a little bit earlier about NestFest. This is the website that you need to go to, and I will put it in the chat, in the comments down the side. So don't worry about that. I just want to share. And we talked about Saturday's performance, which is Carl Goff, Miriam Mara Menzies. I don't know why I keep calling her Maria. Mara Menzies, Taffy Thomas, Liz Weir, and myself emceeing. And then on Sunday at the Nest Fest, we've got Heather Forrest, George, I can't pronounce that name. I'm not going to try because I don't want to butcher it. J. O'Callahan, and that's going to be emceed by one of New York's finest, Kate Dudding. So you can get tickets for that right
and
there.
That's when Jay's doing Little Dragon, right?
Yeah, he is doing Little Dragon.
Yeah, so that's
and Jay, he's not telling that much right now.
And when he does tell, he's usually doing adult programs. So
right.
It's rare for him to be telling any of those old children's stories. I'm just so excited.
I know, it's an incredible story, and if it's one of those stories that are so magical that you fall into it and you want to listen to it again and again and again. As an adult, you want to listen to it again and again and again.
I want to tell it again.
So imagine my kids loved that story. When I wasn't with my kids when I heard him tell it, and so I didn't have to, but I chose to buy the CD with the story on it because I knew that it was such a good story. So if you don't know Jay Callahan, who is an absolute legend, this is going to be one of the last. It's getting to the point where he's not going to be telling for much longer, and he's admitted that to me in the podcast interview that I did with him. So please do, if you want to see him live, then this is well, you got to invite him down to Stone Soup. That's what you got to do, Tom. You got to go and see him at Nestfest. All right, bye, Kristen. Have fun. All right, so I can't think of a story no story popped into my head while you were telling that.
Really?
Yeah.
Don't you have one of those throw out stories like the vinegar bottle? Or
I could do the vinegar bottle. You want me to do the vinegar bottle?
I would love to hear you do the vinegar bottle. I've only told it about 3,000 times.
I think if there are any storytellers out there, you know what this story is. But if you've got little kids here, then they might not know the story. This is a really, really, really old story. It's collected by Joseph Jacobs, I believe. And it's all about this little old lady. And she lived in a vinegar bottle. Now, I imagine that this particular vinegar bottle was quite large if she was living in it. Because, vinegar bottles aren't generally that big. Well, one day she had been living in a bottle. She climbed out of a vinegar bottle and she's doing her chores and she's huffing and puffing. And this fairy who had been on this errand, looking after some other people, came flying by and saw the lady, and she was sighing and grumbling. And the fairy thought, well, maybe I could do something good for this woman. And so the fairy flew down and landed right next to the lady who lived in the vinegar bottle. And the fairy said, excuse me, is everything all right? And the old woman, no, not really. I'm a little bit fed up, to be honest, living in this vinegar bottle. Oh, I might be able to do something about that, said the fairy. Go to sleep, and when you wake up, you will see what you shall see. Well, what do you mean? Well, you're fed up of living in a vinegar bottle, right? Well, yes. Go to sleep, and you will see what you will see. And so the woman in the vinegar bottle, she thought, all right, I'll go to sleep then. And she went back in the vinegar bottle and took a nap. And the fairy flew off. And when the woman woke up, she wasn't in a vinegar bottle. She was in what looked like a little tiny bedroom. And she went outside the bedroom and she found herself in a quaint little cottage. She was so excited. She explored a cottage. She has a little garden out front with a picket fence and everything. She loved it. And a year and a day went past. The fairy, she was wondering about the woman in the vinegar bottle, who was now in the cottage, and wondered how she was faring. So she flew to see this woman and landed next to her. The woman was in a garden, looking after some plants that she had grown. And she was grumbling. And then the fairy looked at the woman and said, is everything all right? Are you happy with the cottage I gave? Well, it's nice. Yes, it's a very nice cottage, but it would be nicer if I had. It's fairly small. It would be nicer if I had a larger cottage and maybe a small farm with some more animals, so I could make some more money selling things like eggs and milk and stuff like that. well, why don't you go to bed? And when you wake up, you shall see what you shall see. So the woman that had been living in a vinegar bottle and was now living in this cottage, she went to bed. And when she woke up, there she was, in a farmhouse. And there were fields that were hers, and she had cows and sheep. And she even had a couple of people to help look after. She was amazed. Well, a year and a day went by, because it's always a year and a day in these stories. And the fairy decided to visit the woman who was in a vinegar bottle and then in a cottage and now in this beautiful farmhouse to see how she was doing. And the fairy flew along and alighted next to the barn on a fence where the woman was working. And she was huffing and puffing again. Well, is everything all right? Said the fairy. Well, I suppose it is, but this is a lot of hard work. I didn't realize how much work this was, looking after a farm and everything. It would be much nicer if I had a grand house with servants to look after me. The fairy thought, I think I could do something about that. And so the fairy looked at the old woman and said, well, why don't you go to bed, and when you wake up, you shall see what you shall see. And so the woman that had lived in a vinegar bottle in a cottage and now living in this nice little farmhouse, she went to bed and went to sleep. When she woke up, she was in a fine house. The bed itself, it was a 4-poster bed with curtains all the way around it. There were paintings on the wall of her family relatives, some of which she met. It was amazing. And she looked around more and more and explored the house. There was a butler, and there was a cook, and there was a couple of assistant cooks, and there were servants all over the place. Her wardrobe that she found, it was filled with all these wonderful clothes. She liked it very much. Well, a year and a day went by, right? And the fairy came back again. And it alighted next to her in the piano room. She was having piano lessons. She had been able to hire her own piano tutor, someone to teach her how to play the piano, for you little kids that don't know what a tutor is. And the fairy sat down and asked the woman, so how is this? Are you enjoying this? Well, it would be much nicer if I was a queen. She'd learned how to talk posh now. I would like to be a queen, a ruler of a nation, and have even more land, and have even more places to look after, and have even more servants. And so the woman smiled at the fairy, and the fairy looked and thought, well, I think I can do that. Go to sleep, and when you wake up, you shall see what you shall see. And so the woman went to sleep, and when she woke up, she found herself a queen of a small nation, and she was overjoyed. How much time passed by? A year and a day. That's right. And the fairy thought, oh, she's got to be happy by now. I've got to go and find out. And so she flew to that nation, that this woman who was in a vinegar bottle, then in a cottage, then in a large house, and now was this ruler of this country, a farm, and then the large house. Now was a ruler of this country. Do you think she was happy? Nah, she was grumbling. And the fairy alighted next to her and said, what's wrong? Well, I am doing very finely as the queen of this nation, but I want to be ruler of the world. And so the fairy looked at the woman and said, go to sleep. And when you wake up, you shall see what you shall see. And so the woman went to sleep. And when she woke up, she was back in the vinegar bottle. The end.
Yes, she was right back
where she started. So how many of you tell that story? How many people out there that tell that story in their set?
Like I said, it's one of
your go-to stories.
Right. When I just need to pull something out.
Yeah, it's not one of my go-to stories. I don't tell that, as you can tell. I don't tell that story very often at all. I've probably told it about 3 times, which is why Quinn only gave me a thumbs up instead of a whole bunch of clapping hands.
So, but that's the thing about telling a story. As you tell it over over again, it smooths out and gets all soft corners and stuff like that. Teeny tiny. Which
right.
is the go-to stories.
It is. It is. So did that inspire you to tell any stories, Papa Joe?
What was that?
Did it? You got the heater on down there?
It just came on in the middle of your story.
Yeah, I thought it did because I could hear this noise.
Can you hear it?
I can. Yeah, I muted it. I muted you out. I tell a version, but I call the woman who lives in a teeny tiny trendy house. I like that, Aaron. That's a nice idea. Teeny tiny trendy house. Oh, I've moved on now. I've always loved that story. Especially. Oh, wow, really? You like that, Via? Thank you. I appreciate that.
So,
either of you have any stories about angels? Ooh.
Yeah, I don't do angel stories. I don't know any angel stories. Folktales.
Yes,
so
that is. There's a story with an
story?
angel in it. And I bet you tell it too, Papa Joe.
Which one?
It's the story of Wicked John, the blacksmith.
Yeah, well, I have Saint Peter in it, and the devils, but I don't actually have any angels.
See, I don't have it as Saint Peter. I have it as a mysterious figure, and when he goes up to heaven, the angels are like standing around while Saint Peter is going through. Should I tell that story?
The devil? Yeah, go ahead.
Or do you want to tell it?
No.
Why don't we both tell it? Let's see how different it is.
You want to tell part of it and then pass it to me?
All right, let's do that.
But, it's going to be kind of weird with the versions.
Yeah. So I'll start off because you got the heater still going on.
Okay,
and
good.
I'll mute you out, and then I'll start the story. Where do you want to come in?
Where?
So when death.
Just pass it to me, and I'll pick it up whatever I have to.
All right then. So this is storytelling live at work. Oops, sorry.
Hey, that's me.
Wrong button. I was trying to mute you. Sorry, mate. All these buttons and controls. It's very hard to control sometimes. All right. Once upon a time, there was this blacksmith. And this blacksmith, his name was John. And John, now if he'd lived in New England, they would have said he was a wicked, good blacksmith. Because he was a really good blacksmith. With sense of humor, however you like to take that. And because he had a wicked sense of humor, and his humor was a little bit on the dark side, people behind his back called him Wicked John. He liked to do pranks and play jokes on people. And some of these jokes and pranks, they weren't always the nicest kinds of things. Well, one day, Wicked Johnny's working, working at his blacksmith, and the sparks are flying, and the furnace is going, and the bellows. He's working those bellows, getting the metal nice and hot before he can take it. Tang, back to the big. What's it called? I know what it's called. Don't tell me. It's one of those having a senior moment here. Anvil. He's got this big anvil, and he's banging on the anvil. And as he was taking a break, because it was like really hot in there, he looked out of the window of the forge, and he saw this person that was a traveler. Now, it could have been St. Peter. It could have been an angel. It could have been one of the wee folk. We're not really sure. I'm not really sure. And he's looking out the window, and he sees this traveler, and he's knocking on people's doors. And he's asking for alms. I mean, I'm not talking about arms and legs arms. He's looking for the other kind of alms. He's looking for food and shelter. And as Wicked John listened, he heard the man saying that he'd been traveling a long ways, and he was tired and hungry, hadn't eaten in a day, and the door would shut, and he'd go to the next house. And the man would ask for alms again. And door after door was slammed in this man's face. And Wicked Johnny thought he would put the town to shame. He would make them feel bad about themselves. So he leaned out of the window, opened up the window, leaned out of it, and, "Oi, stranger, come here. I've got some fresh bread that I made this morning. Come on in. And I got some nice cheese, and I got a bit of wine as well. Come on. So the stranger came over, and John welcomed him into his forge and pointed to a chair for the man to sit down in, and he brought the bread out and got some butter, and the bread was still warm. That's how fresh it was. He cut a couple of big, thick slices and got the butter out and planted the cheese on the table next to the guy, and the guy started to cut into the cheese, and the butter just melted into the bread. Oh, you know what I'm talking about. And they got talking. And Wicked John gave him some wine to drink, some beer to drink, whatever the man wanted. And they sat there and they ate and they chatted. And at the end of the meal, the man looked up at John. He says, you know, you were very kind to me. You were very, very generous. You welcomed me into your forge, your home, and you've given me this bread and this wine and cheese. I have a very nice time with you. I would like to grant you a wish. What are you talking about? Give me a... Go on. There's no such thing as wishes. No. Believe me. Let me grant you 3 wishes. You're not having me on. You're not like put up by the townsfolk, are you? No. Don't be so skeptical. Tell me, what would you like? All right. Well, Wicked John, he looked around his forge, thinking of what he might like. And his eyes landed upon one of his favorite hammers. And he looked at the traveler and he says, you know what? People come into my forge sometimes when I'm not working, and they'll take this, my favorite hammer, and they'll borrow it without asking me. And they'll go and use it. And the kids, they'll come in after school and they'll run in here and they'll borrow my hammer to smash stones to see if there's any, like geodes, if they got any quartz or anything like that in there. And I'm fed up with it. Oh, so you would like another hammer that people could borrow? No. I want anyone that takes that hammer without my specific permission. I want them to be able to take hold of that hammer, and all of a sudden that hammer will take hold of them, and it will start beating them about the body and about the head. That's a terrible thing to wish for. You said I could wish for anything that I want, and that's what I want. And then when I say it will release, then they'll be released. But until then, it's boom, 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 boom. That's a terrible wish. Nevertheless, that's what I want. Well, your wish is granted. What about your second wish? I hope it's better than the first. I know. You see this rocking chair right here? Yes. Well, that rocking chair is my favorite chair. And sometimes people come in, they just want to pass the time of day and take up all my precious time, and they'll sit down in my rocking chair when I've got another chair for people that come in here, for my clients. And it really bothers me. Oh, so you would like another rocking chair for people to be more comfortable in your forge? No. I want them to be stuck in that rocking chair, and the rocking chair to rock so violently that their head hits the back of it and their knees fly up and bonk them in the nose. That's an awful wish. Nevertheless, that's what I want to wish for. That's a terrible wish. But your wish has been granted. Now, your third wish, I hope it's better than the other 2. John thought. Yeah, I know what I want to wish for. When you came inside, you saw the rose bush out the front of my cottage? Yes, I did. There's some beautiful blossoms on there. Yeah, there are. And sometimes people come along in the middle of the night and they clip those roses and take them for themselves. And then when I want some, there aren't any roses left for me. Oh, so you'd like your rose bush to have far more blossoms and blooms and flowers so that you can share your flowers with the village? No. Why would I want that? No. If someone comes and tries to steal my roses, then I want the vines to grab hold of them, pull them tight until they're pricked and poked and their person is punctured until I let them go. Your name is John, is it not? Yeah. You're a wicked man. That's what they tell. That's what they say. Your wish is granted, and I hope you enjoy them. Oh, don't you worry, I will. Nice to meet you. It was somewhat nice to meet you. And the old man left. Well, Wicked John worked very, very hard. And as the years passed, well, the devil came to pay him a visit. And when the devil came into the forge,
John, John, I've been waiting for this. You have been a wicked man. John said, thank you. I am kind of proud of that. Devil said, you're my kind of man, but you're getting a little too powerful up there. We don't want you showing me up. It's time for you to come on down and get to work for me. John said, really? It's I didn't feel like I should be leaving this world now. I'm feeling pretty good. Devil says, well, it's not about your feelings, John. It's time. So let's get going. And John said, well, I'm really kind of busy. At least you should let me finish this shoe. Devil said, no, John, we don't have that kind of time. John said, well, if you don't have that kind of time, then maybe you could give me a hand. Just pick up that hammer and swing it a couple of times. We'll be done. Devil said, oh, all right. So he grabs a hold of the hammer, and next thing you know, that hammer is coming up on his head, down on his toe, swinging back and forth and up and down, swinging him around so much the devil's just going crazy. John, what's going on with this? What's going on? You stop this hammer. Just stop this. John said, well, I'm not ready to leave yet. So, I don't mind you swinging that hammer. You can do it all the rest of my life. Devil says, no, I can't do this anymore, John. You gotta stop it. And John says, well, will you leave me here? Devil says, I'll leave you alone. I'll leave you alone for a year. John says, well, okay. Hammer, let him go. And that devil, he was gone. And he stayed gone for that whole year. And when he came back, he was madder than the place he comes from. Yeah. John, it's time for us to go. I gave you that year and that's over. Time for us to go. John says, oh, gee, devil. It's been a while. I'm almost finished with this. You want to grab the hammer? Devil says, I ain't grabbing that hammer. Okay, devil, I understand that. But maybe perhaps you'd like to just sit down. I'm almost done. If you just sit down in that rocking chair and relax for a minute, I'll be finished. Devil says, yeah, but no more tricks. And he sits down in that rocking chair. And no sooner does he sit in the rocking chair, but it begins to rock back and forth while he hits his head on the floor, he hits his knees on his nose, he hits his nose on the floor, and rocking back and forth, rocking that devil to pieces. He's, John, stop the rocking, John. And John says, I don't think I can do that. Devil says, oh, you better do it, John. You better do it. I can't be doing this rocking all day. Come on, stop the rocking. John says, well, I don't know. I got an awful lot of work to do here. Maybe you should give me another year. Devil says, I'll give you 2 years. Stop the rocking. And so John stopped the rocking and the devil was gone for 2 years. But when he came back, he was bigger and madder than ever. Well, John, your time's up now. Don't be thinking about finishing anything at all. You're coming with me right now. John said, well, Mr. Devil, I guess I'll have to come with you. Might be nice to do one thing before I go, though. Oh, I don't think so. Yeah, Mr. Devil. I was thinking I'll just pick a handful of roses and leave them here on the forge for the next person that comes. They'll see that I left them some goodwill. They'll say, I don't care about goodwill. Here, just take one rose. And he reaches up and plucks a rose off the rose bush. Well, no sooner did he reach into that rose bush, but the vines just wrapped around his arm and pulled him right in. Next thing you know, the needles, the thorns are spiking him and puncturing him everywhere. Poor devil's getting wrapped up in the vines, and he's screaming, John, get me out of here! John says, well, Mr. Devil, I don't know if I want to let you out of there. You just keep coming back here and giving me a hard time. Devil says, I'll never be back here again. If you let me out now, just let me out. I'll never come back. So John let him out, and the devil never came back. Which left John there working away for year after year after year after year after year after year, until his beard hung down to the ground, and his wrinkles, let's just say that a prune would be smoother than his skin. Oh my goodness, John was so old, he'd get up in the morning and it would just go clickety, 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 clack as his bones just managed to snap. And he said, I think it's time for me to move on. So he set his favorite hammer on the forge. He set the door wide open, and he walked on out. Now, John was thinking he didn't really like the idea of that other place. So he headed on up. Went right up to the golden gates, and who does he meet there but that same old man who had given him the 3 wishes? Hey, St. Peter, aren't you? Yes. Oh, I know who you are, Wicked John. Well, I'm hoping that you're going to let me in, St. Peter said. Oh, you, Wicked John? Here. You're not coming in here, and I'll show you why. And he pulls out this book. It's a big, thick book. And he turns the pages until he says, Wicked John, every one of these things, look, is a page for each person in the world. Why, 2 pages, actually. The page on the left is all the good things they've done, and the page on the right is all the bad things. Now, look at all these people that are in heaven. You see, their good list is really big, and their bad list, not much at all. But here we go, John. And he set the book aside, and he got another book. It was a bigger book. He says, hey, John, this book is a little different. John says, what's different about it? Well, this book is just yours. My own book? Oh yeah. It's your own book. And now look at this. And he starts flipping through the pages. He says, these pages are your bad list, John. These are the things that you did that were bad. And he just keeps turning the pages, page after page after page, list after list after list of things that John did that were not very good. And when he got to the end of the book, there in the margin of the last page, at the bottom in the corner, there was one little And he says, hey, John, you see this? This is that time I visited you, and you gave me that food. That was the only good thing you ever did in your whole life, John. And you turned that into a chance to be mean to people. No, John, you're not coming in here, and there's nothing you can do to change that now. It's too late, John. And so John, he just turns around and he heads the other way. Well, what can he do? He only got 2 choices. You either go up there to the pearly gates or down below to the infernal place. And so he went down to the infernal place. And as he's going along, that wall coming to the gate, all of a sudden, little heads pop up there on top of the wall. It's all the little devils. And they're peeking over the wall, and they start eyes popping out of their heads, and their faces turning even redder, and they start screaming as they hop off the wall back downside. They're yelling, devil, 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 it's Wicked John, Wicked John's coming. Well, he just says, bar the gates, bar the gates. And they raised up the drawbridge, too. Yeah, Wicked John is on the other side of the moat, and that's not a moat full of water, that's a moat full of lava. Anyway, Wicked John's on the other side, and he's calling over to the gate, hey, devil, hey, devil. Devil, he goes on up to his gatehouse, and he's on the top of that wall, and he looks over, he says, what do you want, John? John says, oh, devil, they wouldn't let me in upstairs. I'm hoping you can give me a room. Devil says, oh, no, John, no, you're not coming in here. I've dealt with you before, John. I don't need any competition. Oh, I got it. John, you need a place to go? Hang on. And he goes down and he gets a pair of tongs and he grabs a coal out of that hot place, right? And he carries it on up and he whips it over the wall. Well, that piece of coal, red hot, bright red coal, rolls across the road. And Dell says, hey, John, that's yours. You go start your own hot place someplace. And that's what Wicked John did. He picked up that hot coal in his hand, and it was kind of hot. He couldn't really hold on to it. So he found this turnip. Yeah, he found a turnip, and he carved it out, and he stuck the coal in it so that it wouldn't burn his hand. And then he noticed that the hole that he had cut and put the coal into, the light kind of shone out of that, and he thought that was cool. So he cut 2 more holes above that and make eyes. That was like the mouth before, and now it's 2 eyes. And he had a turnip with a face on it, a little smiley face and a red glow coming out of it. He thought that was kind of fine. And so he could wander around looking for a place to start a new world. Maybe purgatory or something. I don't know. Yeah, he had to start something. And as he's walking around, once in a while people would notice that. They call him the will-o'-the-wisp or the lights in the dark, but really it's just Wicked Jack with his turnip. And well, that story has been told all across Europe. And when people from Europe came over to this continent here in North America, they carried the story with them. But when they got here, instead of these turnip carvings, they had pumpkins, and pumpkins are so much easier to carve than so. They started carving pumpkins and sticking a little fire inside that. And today we call them jack-o'-lanterns after Wicked John. Jack's another name for John. Didn't know that story, did you? But that's the story of Wicked John and the Devil. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes, that was the invention of jack-o'-lanterns. That's where they came from.
Oh,
I love that. And Colin Irwin, he mentioned that. So I got to like Colin because my brother's name is also Colin. We call it jack-o'-lantern. That's right.
Jack.
Pumpkins are way easier to carve than those turnips. I don't know if anybody here has tried to Has anybody tried to carve a turnip? But they are not easy to carve at all. They're like
use an apple corer.
Yeah.
That
you did, Quinn? Nice. Thank you, mate. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a good story. I like that. The ghost. Oh, someone's requested the ghost and the applesauce, and that's a story we both know. Again.
All right, I start it this time.
Yeah, you do. Hang on. So I got a few more comments. You can grab a glass of water or something. Tom liked that, or Karen liked that, or both of them liked it. I don't know. Both halves, yes. So the way that I tell that differently, if anyone cares, it was awesome. He's good, isn't he, Scott? Bravo, gentlemen. Love that story in the team tag team, yes. So it was, wasn't it? First heard on a Saturday with Liz Weird. Yes, Liz is brilliant. I love Liz.
I usually do it with 3 different devils. Starts out with a little teeny tiny devil and it works its way up to the big one.
Oh, okay. And I usually, so the way that I tell that is that it's the devil, and then death comes to get him. And I like the way that you use the separate book for him. That was brilliant. I love that.
There's a lot of bad things, John.
Right. So I just have the big book, and it's like, well, you did some good things here. You've made all these people very happy with the products that you've made, and these are all the wow. This is a lot of bad things. But I might steal that from you, Papa Joe. All right, so you're going to start off with it. So I got to say this. So Papa Joe took a little sabbatical for about 10 years. And I basically, he kind of like moved away from storytelling in this area just as I was arriving and started telling stories. And so I kept hearing about Papa Joe. And I was looking for some good Halloween stories. And Karen Chase, who's a dear friend of both of ours, she mentioned that story, The Ghost and the Applesauce. I was like, I don't know. I want to get permission from Papa Joe. And she said, oh, he loves people telling the stories. Just tell it. He won't mind at all. And because Karen is very, 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 get permission type of person. I was like, well, if she's saying it's okay, then it must be okay. But I tried to find. Yeah, I know. I know that now. And so anyway, I started telling the story and I fell in love with it. And 10 years later, when Papa Joe came out of retirement, we met I'm not going to say where we met, but we met at this celebration of someone's life, which was wonderful. And I was like, you're Papa Joe, like the Papa Joe. And he's like, oh yes, I'm Papa Joe, as he does. And like, how you doing? I'm Simon. I'm awesome. And then we discovered that we both talked, he discovered that I started telling this story and we started hanging out together and we become best of friends because of that story. So thank you, Karen. And it turns out that we tell it. Well, I've never heard you tell it. So I'm going to get out of the way and let you do it. Papa Joe.
I don't think it's all that different. So
I probably not.
Once there was a miser, and he wasn't an ordinary miser. He didn't hoard gold or silver. This man hoarded applesauce. He lived in a village far from the other villages, and he owned all of the apple trees. Every year at harvest time, the miser would pick his apples. He would mash them into applesauce, and he would fill up his bottles, hundreds of bottles, thousands of bottles, hundreds of thousands of bottles, and he would put those bottles down into his applesauce cellar. And that's very important, so don't forget it. Where did he put the bottles?
In the cellar. Applesauce cellar.
Applesauce cellar. Now, Miser loved applesauce. He ate it every chance he got. Every morning for breakfast, he would have applesauce on his toast, or applesauce in his oatmeal. But his very favorite breakfast treat was applesauce on his Cheerios. Oh, the miser loved applesauce. He had it every day for lunch. He would have applesauce on his beans, or applesauce on his peanut butter and applesauce sandwiches. And his very favorite lunchtime treat was applesauce on his hamburgers. Every evening, the miser would have applesauce for his dessert. The miser loved applesauce. He ate it every chance he got. But if somebody said, "Please, sir, could I have a little of your applesauce?" You know what he would say. No, not no. He would say, "No, no, 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 I won't share my applesauce with anyone. If you want some applesauce, go make your own." But of course, they couldn't make their own applesauce because he owned all of the apple trees. He owned all the apples, and he wouldn't even share an apple seed with them so they could grow their own trees. So I guess they couldn't make any applesauce, could they? But he did love his applesauce. Now, one day, an old beggar made the trip between the villages. He'd been walking for 3 days, hadn't seen a soul in all that time, hadn't had a bite to eat. And as he crawled down out of the forest, he looked out and saw the village. Houses! And where there's houses, there's... No, not the applesauce. He meant there's people. And where there's people, there's... No, food. I don't know about the applesauce yet. I just got here. Well, the old man, he crawled down to the first house in the village, pulled himself up the rail, lifted the knocker. Then he leaned against the door post and he waited. But the house that the beggar knocked on was the house of the mice, who had just sat down to a delicious hot dog and applesauce lunch. Now the miser jumped up and he went to the door and... Tag.
The miser... Hang on, I've got to pull myself up.
You have to open the other window.
I do. There we go. And the miser looked up. "They want my applesauce. They're not getting my applesauce, whoever it is." And the miser went up to the door and... "What do you want? I've been starving for so long. Please, could I have a dry crust of bread, or maybe a small bowl of that delicious smelling applesauce?" "No, I don't give my applesauce to no one." And he slammed the door shut. Now this man was so tired and weary, he had been slowly sliding into the room, and as the door was slammed shut in his face, he put his hand back and he fell back and knocked his head on the ground. His eyes closed shut. Out of his mouth came a mist, a slow, spiraling mist that rose up into the air, and this mist started to take shape, and it took the shape of the man who was laying there as if dead. It got bigger and bigger and took more details on, and then started to drift over to the house. and with its shady hand, knocked on the door. Ah, some people just can't take no for an answer. The miser got up from the table, opened up the door. I told you that you couldn't. Who are you? He looked up at this ghostly apparition, looked through the ghostly apparition. What do you want? What have I done? Feed me, said the apparition. Well, I suppose I can get you a little bit of applesauce. He got the smallest bowl out of the one cupboard that had anything in other than applesauce, and scooped out a ladle of the applesauce and handed the bowl to the ghostly shape. More. All right, here you go. More. All right, here you go. More. Yes, more. It went on and on until the pan was empty. More. But you finished it off. The ghostly apparition pointed to the floor.
The apple cellar.
What do you mean? How do you know? More. Well, he went, pulled the carpet back. He lifted up the brass latch and opened up the trapdoor and started to make his way down the stairs into the cellar, to the apple sauce cellar. And there, he lit a candle, and the room was lit up, and there were stacks, like library stacks, stack after stack after stack. And the stacks weren't filled with books. No, they were filled with jars of
applesauce.
Applesauce. The ghost floated down through the floor, still with the bowl. How the bowl made it through, I don't know, but it did. Feed me. He opened up one jar. Thump. Into the bowl. More. More. And it went on and on, jar after jar. Thump. More. Thump. More. Thump. More. Until every single jar on every single stack, on every single shelf was emptied. If you had taken all of those jars and set them upside down in a bathtub or something, the stuff that the residue from the side of those jars may have come out and filled up maybe 3 jars of applesauce total. The miser, he was on the floor weeping. If only I'd given him a dry crust of bread, if even a slice of bacon, I'd still... It's the end of the apple season. I've got to wait a whole year. He fell to his knees weeping. And that ghostly apparition made its way up through the stairs, out of the door, to that man's mouth, and it was as if the man was breathing it in. And then the man's eyes snapped open. Oh, excuse me. My belly was aching because I was so hungry before, but now I feel my belly's aching because it's full of applesauce. This is remarkable. Well, the man stood up, made his way into town. He got himself a job as a blacksmith. They were short of a blacksmith, actually. One had just left recently. And the miser, well, he changed his ways. He decided that being a miser wasn't such a good thing after all, if things like that happened. If people came to his house and asked for some apples to scrump off the trees, he'd be like, yeah, sure. And he started to make applesauce. And, well, he started taking it to the local markets. And would sell the applesauce there. And he lost the reputation of being a miser and became known as the best applesauce maker in the whole of the region. The end.
And there you go, a story of the ghost and the applesauce.
Tag team.
A story. Yeah,
Love it.
and I enjoy that, listening to that story. After I told it for about 20 years, it probably was my most told story back in the 90s. I was so tired of that story. When I heard that you were telling, I was like, yeah, somebody else.
Well, I'm glad to have taken up the slack there, Papa Joe. Yeah, it's that and Black Bubblegum are two stories that at Halloween time are requested the most. Black Bubblegum, that's a good story as well. Well, folks, we've been going on for an hour and a quarter, and I'm sure you have other things to do, unless we get a sudden request for another story. Do you want to tell another story, Papa Joe?
Oh, you want me to tell a goodbye story?
A what story?
Fit a teeny tiny one in.
Oh, do teeny tiny. That's a good one. All right.
Teeny tiny while ago, there was a teeny tiny woman in a teeny tiny house on a teeny tiny hill. One teeny tiny day, the teeny tiny woman took a teeny tiny walk down the teeny tiny hill, down the teeny tiny road, till she came to a teeny tiny wall. And in that teeny tiny wall, there was a teeny tiny gate. So the teeny tiny woman went through the teeny tiny gate into a teeny tiny graveyard. And I bet that makes you a teeny tiny bit afraid. Oh, you're not scared?
Teeny tiny bit.
She wasn't either. She walked a teeny tiny way through the teeny tiny graveyard till she came to a teeny tiny gravestone. And at the teeny tiny foot of the teeny tiny gravestone, the teeny tiny woman found a teeny tiny bone, picked it up in her teeny tiny hand, and with her teeny tiny voice, the teeny tiny woman said, "This teeny tiny bone will make teeny tiny me a teeny tiny soup for my teeny tiny supper." What? Don't you like bone soup? I do. The teeny tiny woman put the teeny tiny bone in her teeny tiny pocket, took a teeny tiny turnaround, walked a teeny tiny way through the teeny tiny graveyard, through the teeny tiny gate, in the teeny tiny wall, up the teeny tiny road, up the teeny tiny hill, till she came to her teeny tiny house. In the teeny tiny door and up the teeny tiny stairs, the teeny tiny woman went to her teeny tiny bedroom, took the teeny tiny bone and locked it in a teeny tiny cupboard, climbed in her teeny tiny bed, pulled the teeny tiny covers to her teeny tiny head, took a teeny tiny nap. But a teeny tiny while later, the teeny tiny woman heard a teeny tiny voice coming from the teeny tiny cabinet, and it said, "Give me my bone." Well, the teeny tiny woman was a teeny tiny bit afraid, so she pulled the teeny tiny covers a teeny tiny bit tight to her teeny tiny nose and went back to her teeny tiny nap. Teeny tiny while later, the teeny tiny woman heard that same teeny tiny voice coming from the teeny tiny cabinet. This time it was a teeny tiny bit louder, and it said, "Give me my bone." Well, the teeny tiny woman was a teeny tiny bit more afraid, so she pulled those teeny tiny covers a teeny tiny bit tight around her teeny tiny head and went back to her teeny tiny nap. And a teeny tiny while later, the teeny tiny woman heard the same teeny tiny voice coming from the same teeny tiny cabinet. This time it was a lot louder, and it said, "Give me my bone." Well, the teeny tiny woman was a teeny tiny bit more afraid, but she pulled the teeny tiny covers from her teeny tiny head, sat up in her teeny tiny bed, and said, "Just take it!" And the teeny tiny woman never heard the teeny tiny voice in the teeny tiny cabinet again. But she also didn't get that teeny tiny soup for her teeny tiny supper. And now it's time for a teeny tiny the end.
Brilliant. That's so good. So Jane Dorfman put a really funny comment up there that I wanted to share. She was a teeny tiny cannibal.
Hey, it might have been a chicken bone.
It could have been a chicken bone, yeah. And I was just saying that oxtail soup used to be my favorite soup before I became a vegetarian a million years ago. So yeah, that's a great story. And the speed at which you do it is remarkable. I love it.
Well, tell it 1,000 times. You'll see.
I know. Yeah, it's true. And some people are asking about. Sorry, go on.
I like bone soup. I really do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever
human bone or whale bone or.
Well, I've never had human bone or whale bone.
Oh, really?
Deer's cows, pigs, chickens, a few other animals, but no people.
There you go. I'm glad to hear that. Seeing as you're in my base, in my garage right now.
Oh, I like babies.
Small babies. Oh, give me my baby. The other white meat, as they say in that movie, Austin Powers. So some people asking about the that story that you and I told, the miser and the applesauce, saying, is that a folk tale? And no, it's not.
No, it's a fairy tale.
And all right, so it's a fairy tale, but it's not it's an original by Papa Joe and a bunch of school kids in New Hampshire. Am I right? Do you want to tell that story about that story?
Yeah, so right back in the 80s, I was working at a preschool, the one I was working at today, actually, Live and Learn.
No way. Really?
And I was in the kindergarten class, and the kids, it was right after, it was the beginning of October. The kids go, we want a ghost story, we want a ghost story. But I was a young storyteller, and I didn't have a really large bag of stories back then. I said, I don't have any ghost stories I can tell to kindergarten kids. And they said, we want a ghost story, we want a ghost story. I said, well, I suppose we could make one up. Let's see. And I look around the room. Well, they had just been on a trip to the apple orchards picking apples, and they had made applesauce, so you know where that comes from, the ghost and the applesauce. And I was working on a story from Tal and the Amazing Adventures of Nooms to Noom. It's a story about a miser, and so that was in my head, and I said, oh, we could have a miser. It's the bad guy. And so what would this miser? Oh, the miser hoards applesauce. And so the story was born. And that was about it. The kids loved the story. And when I went to the next group of kids, they wanted a ghost story. And I said, well, this one just worked. So I told it to them. And I ended up telling it 30 times that month at the different.
Yeah,
put it into my head, right?
Yeah.
And then it was so well received, I kept telling it. Well, after you tell it 100 times, it really gets strong. 200 times, it really gets clear. And then it never went away. So in the next decade, I probably told it a couple of thousand times.
Yeah, I bet. I know I've told it a few hundred times.
It's a great tale.
It is. And thank you for letting us all tell it. I appreciate that. Not everyone. Yeah. You're not everyone telling the story.
Everybody. I want everybody telling every story. You know, this is our culture. If we don't share our stories, then we're letting TV run our culture, and I don't think we really want that to happen much longer.
No, we don't. We don't indeed. So what I did want to mention is Erin J. She asked if the teeny tiny woman is from the big hairy toe, and I think the big hairy toe might be from the Golden Arm, and I think the teeny tiny woman might also be from the Golden Arm, which is a story that Mark Twain used to tell. But I think he wasn't the first person to tell it, was he?
Teeny tiny is also a Joseph Jacobs tale.
Oh, it is. Well, maybe the Golden Arm came from the teeny tiny woman, and maybe Mark Twain made that up. I don't know. The Golden Arm it was a story that he used as an example for a jump story.
Right, and
it's normally told as a jump story, like the big toe.
But it was a common storyteller's tale even then. The Golden Arm is still one of the top storyteller's tales I know of.
Right.
There's also an Americanized version of the Golden Arm, which is from Portsmouth. It's General John Moulton. Are you familiar with him?
No.
General John Moulton was the other general. Everybody talks about John Stark, the one who said, live free or die. There are worse things than death.
Right.
Well, everybody loved
halitosis being one of them.
Well, everybody loved John Stark. Nobody loved General John Moulton. The stories about him in The Devil, there's stories about him and his wives. Oh, yeah. So his wife died, and she was put in the grave, and he immediately married her best friend. And the story of that is interesting and extremely close to the Golden Arm. So, you know, that's a true story that was told in Portsmouth. It's true that they told the story in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, in the surrounding areas, and it's almost the same as the Golden Arm.
Wow. It's amazing how these stories change and morph. Jump story, Quinn. Not a jump story. Jump.
Right, but you know, the way the historical things work is interesting too. So, and there's lots of the folk tales were called legends at different times.
Right. Well, that's the whole progression of them, isn't it, really?
The whole congressional thing?
Well, no, that they like there's a true story, and then it turns into a legend as it changes, and then it gets turned into a myth, right?
Or a folktale, right?
Or a folktale, yeah.
People forget that actually something actually happened.
Right. All right, folks. I think it's time for us to wrap up. Thank you so much indeed for being here. I really appreciate it. Can we have a round of applause for Papa Joe? I think we can.
I'll give a round of applause to Simon too.
No, I'm just riding on your coattails, mate.
You can do it on your own right.
Thanks again for being here. Next week we have Kim Whitecamp. Kim Whitecamp is going to be joining me next week for Friday with Friends.
Awesome.
If you want to help out, keep this running, I would greatly appreciate it. Patreon.com, Simon Brooks, or PayPal me, Simon Brooks Storyteller. If you want to drop a tip, that would be wonderful, because I do pay for this program, which makes this kind of stuff possible, and it means that I can make the show a lot more, I think, viewer friendly. I think definitely, for sure. Anyway, thanks for being here. I hope you enjoyed the stories that we told, and as soon as you get back from warmer climes, you'll be back down here and joining me again, and we'll swap some more stories.
Well, you'll be the first one I come visit, I'm sure.
I hope so. Take care, mate. Bye, everyone. Thanks for everything. Thanks for being there. We'll see you soon. Thanks for all your comments too. I really appreciate it.